Story 1. Husband reads wife's journal and finds out she lied her way into a polyamorous community for years. So, I found out just over 2 months ago and confronted her 2 months ago yesterday. We are working on things and in the reconciliation mode. But I can't find examples of cases of infidelity that are quite like mine. And only in the past few days have I realized that I've been keeping my hurt to myself in my relationship with my wife, and now it needs to have air to breathe so that the trauma of infidelity doesn't ruin the progress I've made in my life. My situation seems so unique, I have a hard time finding people with whom I can relate. So, background, I guess. High school sweethearts, together for 20 years in May, married 15, have a kid. I am an alcoholic and am 2 months sober. The kind of alcoholic that shuts down, never physically or verbally abusive to anyone. I have depression. I'm on the spectrum. My therapist thinks I have ADHD, and I identify as non-binary. I'm the kind of drunk who just shuts out the world, or rather I was that kind of person. And, like every alcoholic, I lied about it even though I knew she knew. I was like that for 3 years after her father died under trying and unexpected circumstances. I loved him deeply, more than my own father, so out of a misguided sense of care for her emotions, I bottled mine up and turned to the bottle. She grew as a person while I was shrinking, and she explored many things that she never felt she could before. Going to dance parties, starting her own business, shooting a gun, rollerblading. Taking a hallucinogenic, getting a tattoo. She just never thought to do these things, and it's not like I never said she couldn't. I was always enthusiastic about her adventures. She always told me where she was going and with whom, though I didn't ask. But I was proud of her and encouraged her exploration. And I thought things were fine. Lots of intimacy, sex frequency was fine, and the squabbles we had usually were related to housework and expenses. I would have my down moments, verging on incoherence, and she would express that she was frightened for my safety and encouraged me to seek an individual therapist, which I did. Sometime in November, I woke up a little. Probably when she told me she wanted her next adventure to be a 2-month solo backpacking adventure in South America. I was immediately concerned about this because travel had always been our thing and our longest trip ever had been 30 days. And I took a self-inventory, asked some tough questions, and realized that she felt I hadn't been present for her. This was the first time it really hit home, and I created an early sobriety plan. So, I became more engaged with her, more present, had better and deeper conversations, all while I was slowly planning to end my alcohol use. I thought things were going well. We were sharing more things. One day she shared with me a drawing that she made, and it was covered in writing. I started to read it, and she said, "Don't read," and I handed it back. Curious, she left to volunteer, and I of course read it. I wanted to be closer to her, feel closer to her. So, I read it, and found out she considered herself polyamorous, and I had always thought we were monogamous. I read more, this was in her journal, and then I read her private messages and found out quite a bit more. So, she had considered herself poly for 1.5 years before I learned of this. In 2020 she had several romances, almost 10 of them were sexual flirtations online, and a lot of graphic pictures to sort through. But she was telling everyone that she was poly and that I was a closed or don't ask don't tell partner, but that I was ultimately knowing and consenting. I wasn't, I didn't know. So, I joined all sorts of poly groups, learned a bunch, and their words and support helped me for when I was to share my knowledge of this with her. And at that time, she wasn't really poly, because poly is a form of consensual or ethical non-monogamy, and this wasn't that. She was non-monogamous then, she is poly now. I knew that I still loved her and still wanted to be with her, so the conversation that needed to be had was geared in that direction. We had a conversation, everything came out. The lies, how she deceived others and me. How my virtual non-existence and depression made it impossible to tell me without her worrying that I might self-harm. And it all seemed pretty good. A starting point. But that exact day, the day after I quit drinking, my body kind of crashed from alcohol withdrawal, and we went to the emergency room. While there she started telling her serious partners that she had been lying to me and to them, which caused a rift. When we got back, she was angry with me, and from that point on to today I have to watch my step if I want the relationship to succeed. She told me that during my time when I shut myself out, she developed a EFFT attitude, and would just do what she liked, consequences be damned. That she was more upset for lying to her partner of a month than to me about sleeping with all these men, and not telling me. She made it a point to say she didn't apologize for the sex, which is neither here nor there. I didn't ask, so why was that a point she needed to bring up? Fine, honey, have all the sex you want. Some of these things were things she just said to hurt me while she was feeling the pain of her other, nearly ruined new relationship. I've changed a lot of things about myself. I took my therapist's advice to heart for the first time. I entered an outpatient recovery program, started attending sobriety, recovery meetings, sought medical health, and began a program with a nutritionist. I found her a therapist, and we also began couples counseling with a poly-friendly therapist. I'm in the best health of my life, and yet it's taken her a long time to come around on the idea of me. My alcoholism was the larger problem to immediately address, so I focused on that. And I never talked about the depth of my hurt. It was all about how I wasn't there, and that she wasn't happy with parts of me but felt like she had no one to talk to. She was essentially blaming me for not having an outlet. I never told her she couldn't talk to others. Did she need my permission for that? It was obvious that some things didn't require my permission, so why would that? She's a perfectionist and didn't want to ruin anyone's perception of us as the perfect couple, or of me as a perfect spouse and parent. And she is having a hard time getting over that, whereas I almost immediately knew I could heal from her betrayals and was happy to celebrate her poly relationships. So, I buried some of my hurt for a bit, because I was afraid if it came bubbling up that our conversations would become blame matches, and if she was not as invested in our future as I was, then what was the point in giving voice to my pain? But while I'm happy with her poly life and love, I still have grievances about the deception. I want her to be more open about these things. My feelings are valid, they matter, and I want in. Before I talked with her on January 21st, we were having great moments of intimacy and really pretty good sex. Now that she knows and also has the freedom to address my alcoholism, she has been shutting these things down, to the point that I have to ask permission before I hold her hand or even give her a compliment. And I can manage all that. This is a new dynamic, new understandings of consent, fine. But my hurt has been lost in all this, and in looking at the sheer profundity of her romances and sexual conquests, well, marriages have ended over less, let's say. It's clear that we both still love each other. We are finding new moments of intimacy, and there has been a decent amount of sex. But we both have pain, and she has not been in a good place to receive my words. Until yesterday, when we talked using several tools our therapist provided to keep everything as comfortable as possible. So, what I would like help with from the forum are thoughts from people with similar experiences, and how do I continue to address my own hurt when she only wants to focus on hers? Are you okay with the fact that your wife, who hid these secrets from you, will be having sex with other partners? Oh, yes, I'm fine and supportive of everything moving forward. I've been helping her with relationship advice and such. I know their names and have been in pleasant communication with those who are more serious than casual. It's the past and her attitudes about it that are troubling. My hurt isn't about her actions going forward, unless it involves duplicity or further omissions. We've had a couple of in-depth conversations about my pain these past couple of days. Our marriage counselor has been helpful with providing tools for constructive conversation. And my other partner has been extremely encouraging, helping to build my initiative and formulate my thoughts as I process my feelings. I'm just going to file some of the posts here that get a little more accusatory than perhaps necessary in the doesn't know the full story section. I mean, it would be far lengthier to tell more of the intricate details of our relationship and my understanding of my wife, so it makes sense for some of you to fill in the blanks. I'll keep what is helpful and discard what is not, and I am thankful for all the feedback I've received. She was in tears for most of the past 2 days, realizing my suffering and understanding how spiteful and cavalier she had been before. She had several waves of realizations yesterday about the depth of my hurt and kept apologizing throughout the day at intervals when it came flooding back. How she wanted to tell me long before she acted. How her not telling me was likely more related to protecting her own image than it was to prevent me from falling into despair and self-harm. Harsh, brutal realizations about her actions. It's just slightly easier for me to get to the point of feeling comfortable with her than it is for her toward me. That's on her, obviously, but I love her and I'm willing to see what affections return or what new ones might blossom. We're not out of the woods or anything, obviously. I've weighed what a divorce could mean, and I'm in the mental place to manage that if necessary. I would prefer not, since I was slightly older than my son when my parents divorced, and it caused me trauma that I have only now begun processing, ultimately leading to my alcoholism. I'd prefer not to have that cycle begin anew. A commenter asked what your wife was seeking in the poly lifestyle. The reason I asked that is because I can't imagine what would be so important, so necessary, for her in that lifestyle, nor for you that pushing pause for a few months would hurt much. She has been telling me for years that no one person can meet all the needs of anybody else. I did not associate this with romance and sex at the time, but in hindsight it makes sense. It's true of friends, hell it's true of eating food. She is seeking connections of any and all types, and where they lead is where they lead. It's how she started her own business with a business partner, how she enlists people for volunteer events, how she makes different kinds of friends. And it's how she sometimes has sex or falls in love with others. She is a person extraordinarily drawn to people. She can fall in love with anyone. My understanding of her boundaries was not her reality, and the problem is that she didn't tell me and lied about her actions for over a year. She has her own therapist right now as well, and she's working through a lot of problems that that led to her not telling me in the first place. She also has relationships at this point that I have no desire for her to put on pause. We are non-hierarchical, but we are nesting partners with familial and financial entanglements. We want to work on our relationship, but we are not ranking our affections on a scale in which it would make sense for me to cut my partner out of my life for 6 months or for her to cut her partners out of her life for 6 months. Perhaps an embargo on seeking new relationships. But I don't want to resent her for calling a pause on the other currently meaningful things in my life, nor do I want to exacerbate her resentments. I am not going to sit here and tell you the pitfalls of polyamory as it relates to jealousy, and the mere fact that some people do not feel compassion. Some people don't, but I want her relationships to thrive and I'm fairly confident she feels likewise. Reader comment, here's the big problem for you. Polyamory requires radical honesty and transparency. It means well-established boundaries and a shared understanding of what the other relationships mean. I don't think your WW knows what her other relationships mean. She was just effing around and calling herself poly. Original poster, it does. We're being honest now. We are being vulnerable together. And yes, she wasn't polyamorous before. One needs to be ethical and understand the consent. She is poly now. One of her partners has a long history with poly, is extremely ethical and protective of his meats and almost called it off with her before I intervened. I didn't take her saying she was poly as her excuse, I saw it in her personal journals. She was not being ethical, but it's all very much there. Reader comment, this is what I'm telling you to look out for. Entirely possible. Cheating happens in polyamory all the time, so if that does occur your theory will have been validated. In 20 years together this has been the first time I've known her to lie, and if she needs to cheat in this much more open understanding then it's not about sex or romance, it's about something else entirely. I sense that all is not well in your second relationship. You say your wife seemingly supports it. There is a lack of enthusiasm. All is well, but I'm finding that time management is important. My wife has expressed envy for the attention my new partner is receiving, but supports our relationship and wants to meet her soon. I'm sorry, but what is the point of remaining married? Apparently, I am not cut out for open marriage, but if having partners other than your spouse, why bother getting married or remaining in a marriage? Why divorce just for a paradigm shift in the marriage? When there's a kid involved, when we do still love each other. We probably wouldn't get married if there weren't several entanglements, but being that there are, and being that they aren't bad entanglements, what's the rush to divorce? I wish you well, but I don't think I can offer you any advice that will get through. I seriously doubt anyone here can offer you constructive advice based on the constraints you set yourself. Original poster, I really do see your point. And while I recognize that I am stubborn in many areas, I also recognize that the relative dearth of information I've provided presents my one-sided view and leaves little room for nuance on my part. In talking to my therapist today about some of the points here, she is not in concurrence with many of the views I've seen here. And I really do appreciate what I've read here, even if I ultimately choose not to act upon most of the suggestions. I recognize that some of what comes across to this board as vindictiveness and blaming the victim on the part of my wife is also a very natural part of what spouses feel in recovery. It is simply more layered than usual, because we both have our issues that affected the other. It's common for the spouse of an alcoholic to have these feelings of resentment, even while the newly sober spouse does well in recovery. My concern was the lack of concern she initially espoused at the beginning, which I have now addressed with her. It feels like a place of healing. There is that disparity in how willing she is to get to some levels of intimacy. She slept with close to 10 people, but she has 2 serious partners. A major sacrifice for her would be asking her to pause those 2 relationships. Reader comment, you have come on an infidelity site, not a cuckold site. You are quite satisfied with your wife plowing multiple guys while helping her maneuver through her FB trysts. Do you actually get off on her having sex with other men? If so, there are sites designed for cuckolds. You seem to be happy that she's doing what she's doing cause you're actually helping her. This isn't a poly site, and for that I'm out here. Good luck, dude. This is SHTTY advice. The reason nobody is giving you advice is because you are not listening. She cheated. That is not poly. Go to a poly website and you'll get the same advice. You have decided to not address the cheating by making excuses, blame shifting, and gaslighting. That formula just doesn't fit with any advice you'll get here. Original poster, not precisely. People are giving me advice. Some of it is quite helpful. I'm not here for the poly stuff as I have other outlets for that should I have questions related to that. I came here to address the cheating and how I recognize the necessity of addressing it. Reader comment, I would imagine if you go to poly forums, there are spouses in your exact position. I'm sure many polys started out because one spouse cheated. You are in the job forum, which is the emergency room at a hospital. We work on stopping the bleeding. You are fine with your wife effing all the men, some of whom I'm sure were married, considering she had no respect for her own marriage. There have been several BS here who had a WS tell people they were in an open marriage when they weren't. They have hetero who claim to be in an open marriage as a way to manipulate the BS from contacting the OBS. These people are devastated that their WS has cheated on them. So, you may understand why your situation is extremely triggering to them. There is one member here who is openly poly. I wish she would comment. When a BS comes here talking about poly, she tells them cheating isn't poly, and that the poly community despise people like your wife, who claim their spouse is completely aware that their spouse is having sex with multiple people because it gives poly a bad name. Original poster, I get it. I had to make a decision to post here or in the reconciliation section. But the pain I have been feeling is pain I had never addressed with anyone until I did so with my wife this weekend. I looked and saw that some others waited the amount of time I had before making a post on the job section. It feels fresh and never had voice. Look, I'm sorry if it's triggering. You think it wasn't for me. I know that a lot of the advice here come from people interested in committed monogamy. That's what I'm personally into. I'm not trying to convince you that committed monogamy is the way to go for you. I haven't talked about my IC sessions much on here, but my therapist is actually a specialist in polyamory and non-monogamy. Some people might find that troubling. In fact, it was something I hesitated about before our first session. But the reality was that he had a lot of great advice on setting boundaries, advocating for my needs, and all the other things that make any relationship healthy and fulfilling. The explicitness and openness necessary for a poly relationship is completely applicable to monogamous relationships. In fact, many people in monogamous relationships don't properly set boundaries with each other because there is a generally shared societal expectation that they haven't critically assessed. It's reasonable to say that I hadn't critically assessed my boundaries prior to one of the needs from all of your partners should be trust. I don't agree at all with premise that this is a box just one of your partners can meet. Since your wife broke your trust, the path to re-establishing it means her fixing being willing to lie to you. To be honest and not just say F it all, I don't care if my husband gets hurt. She should be showing you she cares with her actions. She should be showing you she is honest and open by non-defensively answering any questions you have about what she has lied to you about and why. Essentially, she should admit she has wronged you. She should be giving you reassurances that things won't happen behind your back again. Maybe that's already happening. I don't know. I know that getting past defensiveness was a big hurdle for my wife. Love is not a measure of capacity for pain you are willing to endure for your partner. Original poster, that perspective is helpful. We have couples therapy today, and I think incorporating some of these thoughts in discussion will be useful. I'm not trying to make my life a peep show. I'm trying to address the pain I'm feeling before it becomes unacknowledged psychological trauma. And there are parts of me that people constantly question when it comes to just about any aspect of my life. So, nothing new there. I'll use your advice to do what I've done with other advice, accept it is possible that her actions are going to be ongoing and cyclical things, and that if she's betrayed me and lied to the others, I'm aware of it's possible this all runs deeper. So, I'll keep an eye out, but not take immediate action which assumes this to be true. I know cheating isn't poly, and I know that being poly isn't an inoculation against SHTTY behavior. I'll accept that my story can be triggering, although I didn't come here to do that. It feels a little one-sided when I come here seeking help. And some of those who cannot relate would rather make snide remarks in what is essentially a support group. Opus wondering how many of the assumptions posted here about my wife are universality versus topicality. It all comes from vast experience, but there are a lot of mistaken assumptions that seem to be coming from a place in which most of my actions, understandings are delusional and unhealthy, and that my wife is now an irredeemable predator of sorts. I understand that my mindset can come across in a certain manner which might be perceived as blithe or naive. Well, in a sense that's exactly why I'm here. To know my blind spots, or at least to know they exist as others see them. It is then my work to weigh the information I receive, to determine what is or seems right and go from there. I always knew this would be a difficult sort of board to ask for advice because while there are commonalities in betrayal and infidelity, not every case can be exactly the same. And the spot I'm coming from falls into a minority experience on this board. So, I have to do extra work. The poly boards, recovery support groups, and everything else are not going to give me advice that works without caveats. So, I need more info and advice to weigh. While I am stubborn in many respects, I do not seek advice with a mindset of premeditated intransigence. Just know that not all advice is going to seem useful to me, though I read and weigh all of it. The advice I'm receiving from all areas is often wildly different, based in a particular focus and understanding, and it is impossible for me to consider all of any of it helpful. Story 2. She is acting like I should be her best friend after she broke my heart. Original poster, hey everyone. I had this forum recommended by someone on Reddit who advised me to tell my story here, so here we go. Almost 12 weeks ago my fiancée, who I've been with for over 6 years, broke up with me via a letter. A few days before this she had a big talk with me about problems she had with me, but they all seemed like really small issues that could easily be solved. Nothing worth tearing a family apart over. After the talk, she spent the day at her mom's but ended up coming home the same night. She told me we were okay and she still wanted to marry me. Obviously, this wasn't true because a week or so later she left me the letter. Fast forward a few weeks later, I've done all the dumb stuff I shouldn't have. Begged, pleaded, apologized. About 4 weeks into the breakup, I found out she'd been emotionally cheating on me with a friend on Facebook. We had a huge argument. She denied that she cheated because they've never been psychically involved. She even said she felt crazy for having feelings for someone she's only spoken to on Facebook. She said that's why she's constantly deleting Facebook all the time. I gave her a chance to stop the affair and work stuff out, but she told me I don't want or deserve your forgiveness. I've been trying to do the best version of NC since, but it's hard when we have a child together. A couple of weeks ago we had a birthday party for our son. At the party she asked why I'm being so cold with her, acting like I should be her best friend after she'd broke my heart. At the party so also told me she still didn't know if she'd made the right decision. She also said we a lot. Do we have this? Do we have that? As if we were still a couple. The day after the party, she introduced our son to her AP and his son. They've only been seeing each other 5 weeks. I was obviously furious. The thing is, she tried to hide it from me by parking her car slightly further away like I wouldn't notice. A week after that we had another text argument when I refused to send her mobile data through my family plan phone contact. She called me petty and pathetic because I wouldn't give her something that she no right to. This guy she's with is a totally bum. He has no job, a crappy little flat, and from what I've heard from a few people, very bad anger problems. So being left for someone like that had definitely knocked my self-worth down a bit. I'd appreciate any advice or support I can get. Thanks. Oh, trust me I did. I'm still in our house. She's at her mom's new boyfriend when she doesn't have our son. I was, still am, but she shows no signs of wanting to. She strung me along with the whole we might get back together. But I think she just wanted me as a plan B, which is why I think she never told me about the cheating. I see no new developments or anything, but I'm not doing good. I still want her back. I definitely think the E was going on for longer than I originally thought after some reflection. I wish I could turn off my feelings for her. It's hard wanting to give someone a chance who doesn't want it. I can't see how R can happen either because she doesn't want it. I'm just having a hard time letting go and realizing she isn't the person I thought she was for 6+ years. I have been ignoring her for a good few weeks now. I don't respond to any texts that aren't to do with childcare. I don't even speak to her when she picks our son up. I'm doing what I can to completely